My guest is a friend of mine from law school. She's a former public defender and currently running for judge in Seattle Municipal Court. I'm excited to welcome Pooja Vaddadi.
Hey, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We were talking before we even started. This is a weird, podcasting is super weird. And I haven't seen you for 8 years, so.
I know, since 1L year at law school.
I know. And then I immediately am like, let's put on cameras and have this be as strange as possible.
It's also my first podcast.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well, this will be good practice for you, I'm sure.
We have another one scheduled on Wednesday. So.
Really? Which one are you doing for that?
Hacks and Wonks. It's a political podcast in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically this, right? It's a comedian that you went to school with for 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was curious, just looking back on stuff. Can you tell the people listening, what was your recollection of me as a law student?
Oh, shit.
I can't even really remember myself.
I saw you in class and we hung out outside of class, but I don't know if you did much law school.
I didn't. I did read a lot. I took it seriously for the first half. And then once I realized, I think 2 weeks in, I said to one of our mutual friends, it's I don't think this is for me.
And you stuck with it for the whole year.
Fuck it. I tried to get out of it. It was horrible.
I actually don't remember that.
You know?
No.
Oh, I remember I called up my mom and I was like, this doesn't seem like it's for me. And they're like, you're going. It's this guy
so it wasn't the school that was giving you a hard time.
No, it wasn't this. I mean, I was on scholarship too, so I at least, saved some cash with that. But those people that they stuck with law school and they knew they didn't like it that first year.
Yeah.
That's a rough look.
Yeah. 2 whole years after that.
And a career, and
a career you don't want.
And the entry into it, on the public side, the financial piece of it's not great.
No. Law school was expensive.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially the people who are going out of state too.
Yeah.
It was wild, but yeah, I mean, we went to school together. You graduated and worked was it up in Snohomish County?
Yeah, I graduated and I worked with a private defense attorney for about 8 months.
Okay.
And then got a job at the public defenders in Snohomish County.
Okay. And what was the bulk of what you were doing in that job?
Trial. I was managing a caseload for about a year there of maybe about 100 cases at any time.
Damn.
Yeah.
And how old were you at the time?
26.
And is that normal for just right out of law school to be doing shit like that?
Do you remember not too many people that we went to law school were straight out of college? I feel like at least most people took a year or two in between to do something else.
Besides just go straight through. I forgot to say too at the beginning of this episode, if you are watching us on YouTube, hit that share, subscribe button, notifications bell. It helps us with the algorithm and new people can find our episode. Please do it. It just helps. Sorry. Forgot to do that. So you're balancing this 100K. That's insane.
Yeah, it was a lot. The office was great though, really supportive. I had a good amount of attorneys mentoring me through the whole process. And there was one attorney in particular that I would just bug her at least 10 times a day with some random question.
And is it when you say trial, what are you doing most of the time?
When I'm in trial?
Or just is it actual trial, trying cases, or is it?
Yeah, it's a full caseload of pending misdemeanors of about 100 people, or 100 cases, not always people. And we'd also have to manage certain calendars. So the probation calendar, for example, people that are there on probation violations or whatever else the court wanted them to talk about. And arraignments. We'd handle an arraignment calendar once every other week.
I can't even remember what some of these words mean. It's so, what is an arraignment? Is that the initial charges being read to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You plead not guilty or guilty.
Okay.
At that time.
And are you going to actual jails and meeting with your clients?
Yeah, so I had a good number of clients that were being held in custody. Most of them, because they were charged with misdemeanors, were out. Unless they had pending felonies, then they'd be in.
What was like the level of cases that you were working?
Misdemeanor level in Snohomish County. So mostly I was in Everett District Court, so mostly I was dealing with DUIs. That's the bulk of my caseload.
Really?
Yeah. And so I took, a good number of DUIs to trial in Everett District Court.
Okay. This I need to ask, and if you can't talk about it, just tell me. But like, if someone's drinking and driving, are there certain things you should or shouldn't do, like with
when you get stopped?
Yes.
Don't ever take the field sobriety tests.
Why is that?
They don't help. Even if you're sober, stone cold sober, they're gonna find clues or something like that. They're gonna see something that you stepped off that imaginary line. Mm-hmm. I personally don't have good balance, so right now, if I were to do any of the field sobriety tests, I haven't had anything to drink, I'd fail.
Okay.
And unless you've had nothing to drink, don't take that on the scene preliminary breath test. That one just measures for mouth alcohol. So if you've had a drink in the last half hour, whether you're drunk or not, it will
detect more.
It'll detect more than what's in your blood alcohol.
But they try to sort of like guilt you into taking it on the spot, right?
They can use it against you if you do go to trial.
That you didn't take it?
That you didn't take it.
Okay.
But sometimes it's way worse to take it than to not. It's also how they form probable cause to arrest you.
Okay.
So you're giving them more information to arrest you.
So what do you do if you're in that situation? I feel like I'm in that 1-800-DUI away commercial right now. But like, I think I actually have played basketball with that guy. But what should somebody do? I feel like someone listening here of my listeners
Taking
might
notes.
have like found themselves in a situation or might. What should you do in that situation? Well,
definitely cooperate with the police officer.
Yeah.
And anytime they ask you to limit how much you tell them as well, like you don't have to answer questions. You can invoke your Fifth Amendment right. You ever seen those Pot Brothers at Law on like Instagram or anything like that? They have the best script in the world anytime you're stopped by a police officer.
What is it?
Well, they call it every Friday. They have a new video and they call it "Shut the Fuck Up Friday." And the crux of all of it is just to, anytime you're dealing with police officers, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And it's when you're pulled over by a police officer, the first thing you ask them is, why have you pulled me over? And if they try to ask you any questions like, what were you doing earlier today or anything like that, you say, I'm not discussing my day with you. And anytime that they, try to goad you into anything, you say, am I free to leave or am I being detained? And then if they say you're being detained or you're not free to go, then you say, I would like to talk to my lawyer. Okay. And I'm gonna, invoke my Fifth Amendment. And then you shut the fuck up.
It's almost like like negging somebody or something. No, like it's a weird, like those interactions, like because it seems like it pisses off the police officer.
Well, you be really respectful. That's also, safety is a big part of this too, for both the police officer and yourself. You want to be as non-threatening as possible. Mm-hmm. And so part of their advice too is to even keep your license and registration up in the visor.
Yeah,
rather than in a glove compartment or in your bag, so that it's really accessible. You announce that you're reaching for what you're reaching for.
Mm-hmm. Some of this might be hard to remember if you're hammered driving your car. Oh. It's not really advice for those people. But.
No, this is advice for people that are following the law.
Exactly. All right. So you were doing like DUI cases or whatever. Did you work your way up into like felony stuff or was it?
No, kind of. I did a year in Everett District Court handling misdemeanor caseload, and then they put me on the felony arrest calendar, actually.
When you say the calendar, explain that a little bit.
Sorry, I use that word because I assume people know what it is. It's kind of what it sounds like. It's people who have been calendared for that day to have a particular hearing. Mm-hmm. And when I say the felony arrest calendar, I mean the the court hearing that's scheduled for people that were just arrested for felonies that previous day.
Okay. And so you, like, they just assign you and you go in and rep that person
just for that day.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not even really an assignment. What they did is they handed me a stack of police reports and said, okay, review their criminal histories, and go to court in the afternoon. And so I'd have to argue for, do you remember what probable cause is? I can explain it too.
Somewhat, but.
Yeah. Just basically like whether or not there's enough there for the court to impose any conditions on them. Mm-hmm. More likely than not that it happened, kind of.
I should know this too.
Do you remember criminal law?
I do remember.
We were all goofing off like in the middle of the classroom.
I remember that class. I remember torts, contracts. We had contracts together, and I'm trying to think what else.
We had all of our classes together.
Did we? We had
were in the same section.
Okay. Yeah. That was
except maybe legal writing. I don't think we had that together.
No, but aren't you teaching that now?
Yeah.
So wow, what's that like?
It's fun.
Is it?
Yeah, I was a TA in law school too, so I always wanted to teach at some point at the law school, so I finally did.
That was the hardest class that we had.
Like, I'm not teaching legal writing 1 though. That one is harder. Yeah, I'm teaching legal writing 2.
Okay.
So it's persuasive writing.
What do you like as a professor though?
Awesome. Yeah. The best, probably.
Really?
No, I like it. I think I'm accessible. Mm-hmm. I think I'm approachable, and I know my stuff. It's a criminal law problem too, so it's like right in my wheelhouse.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I had someone that she hated me from that class was one of the worst experiences of my life. Oh, no. Because I remember like the first week we were there, I had no background in government.
Yeah.
At all. Like I just wanted to go to be a sports lawyer. Like that was the only reason why I was at law school. I got there and like people were talking about the branches of government and like they had poli-sci backgrounds and shit. And legal writing, like there was all that research component of it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was part of going to law school. I had no idea. And Seattle U, where you're teaching, is it still the #1 legal writing program?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I was terrible at it.
Yeah, the legal writing 1 was objective writing, and it was all of the legal writing has a lot of research, but that one was
heavy on that.
I think all of them are. That one was just heavy on the dry, bland, here are the facts, here are the law, no creative writing in it. It had to be pretty bland, and you had to argue a little bit both sides to some extent. Legal writing 2 is a lot more fun.
Did law school prep you for any of your actual work?
Legal writing 2 did, because we also did a criminal motion, and then you do an appellate brief as well.
But has like everything you've learned since then completely kind of contradicted all that, or? I
wouldn't say that. I think law school gave a good background for how to research, and it gave you a good background for learning law. Mm-hmm. But my first job and my job at the Snohomish County Public Defender was like kind of just throwing little baby lawyer Pooja into the fire and figuring how to become like fire retardant. What was that process like? It was a lot of relying on my colleagues, honestly, for as much help as possible. My very first trial, I had my supervisor there for a handful of my cross-examinations or anything like that. But for the most part, I was entirely solo with it, which was interesting. That must be such a strange thing, though, for the actual person being represented. Yeah, he was cool with it though. The client. Yeah, that was an interesting one too. It was a DUI, shocker. And we'd gone through trial, most of trial. We were up to the second day of trial, and that morning when I meet up with my client tells me, "Hey, so at the end of the day yesterday, the judge told us we're not supposed to talk to the jurors." And I was like, "Okay." And he was like, "Yeah, so I made a bad joke to one of the jurors in line at lunch yesterday. And I was like, oh my God. And he was like, yeah, I was standing in line behind her and I joked like, hey, you know, I shouldn't buy you lunch today, should I? It's like, oh my God. I don't know what to do with this. And luckily my supervisor was there with me that morning. And so I talked to her. I was like, I have this problem. It sounds a lot like my not only joked with the juror, but like half bribed her maybe. I don't know. And so, you know, she's like, okay, you have to tell the judge because, you know, your client's probably going to get convicted now because of his conduct with that juror.
Yeah.
And so we talked to the judge and obviously the judge is less than thrilled about what's happening.
Super weird. It's so strange.
It's so weird.
Especially just over something like lunch too, like cafeteria food at a courthouse.
I was like, did you need to joke with the juror? And so we bring this up and we do what's called a voir dire of the juror. Basically, we call her in. She sits in the box and we ask a bunch of questions about how she felt about the interaction. And I think her words were like, yeah, I thought it was inappropriate. I was uncomfortable. I was like, cool. Good start. And then, you know, it all culminates in us asking, so do you think this has affected your ability to be impartial in this case? And she's like, yeah, I think I can still be impartial. I was like, that's not a good answer.
So did you get them out?
So what we do is we only had 6 jurors. We didn't have an alternate, and there needs to be
12
for a misdemeanor. There needs to be 6 jurors for the jury pool. 12 is for Superior Court.
Okay.
And so I motioned to exclude this juror from the panel. The judge makes a really lengthy ruling about how she can't be impartial and all this kind of stuff and excludes the juror and then tries to get us to proceed with 5. And I was like, that's, first off, I don't have any guarantee that she didn't just tell all the other jurors like what conversation took place and how uncomfortable she was.
That was the first thing she said at lunch with the other
You won't
4.
believe what just happened to me. And so that I already had like, I motioned for a mistrial and the judge was like, no, we're going to proceed with 5. And luckily, my supervisor was there, so we all figured out, we like pooled our brain together while I'm on the record, and we found a court rule that said you can't proceed with less jurors than are required without the defendant's permission.
Okay.
And so we didn't give our permission, and so the judge backtracked and like reversed her ruling, put that juror back on the panel, and they convicted my client in 15 minutes. And so, shocker, that case got overturned on appeal so fast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
did you have like a record though, like a fight record basically of like your cases?
What do you
wins
mean?
and losses?
Mostly losses. I was in public defense.
Yeah. Was it? I mean, what's the average for something like that?
For a public defender?
Yeah.
Pretty usually, assuming the system is working the way it's supposed to, you're supposed to lose most of your cases.
Were there cases though that you kind of like, I guess, what were you trying to do most of the time? Like, what did success look like for you?
Success, mostly a lot of my clients, at least in Snohomish County, were faced with a situation where they just, it was no criminal history, first DUI ever. Prosecutor was not offering anything that was enticing. And so let's do what you have a right to do, which is just go to trial. Mm-hmm. Can't get any worse than what the prosecutor's offering, but we roll the dice. Maybe somebody messes up and we get an acquittal. And so, you play the odds in that situation. It's a lot easier to do that in misdemeanor court since the stakes are fairly low. Mm-hmm. And more often than not, how it's supposed to work is the prosecutor's not supposed to offer anything that they wouldn't, again, ask for at sentencing after a trial. Mm-hmm. And so success always looked like my client just being happy with me fighting for them.
And you were fine with doing that?
Yeah. I've won a couple. That's real success.
Yeah.
I've won every case I took to trial in Seattle Municipal Court.
That's dope.
Yeah. Only 3, but still, that's a lot.
Yeah, that is sick. Did you go, I looked at your LinkedIn because I do good research for this podcast, and you did corporate stuff after all this?
Just for a hot minute. Yeah.
It looked not very long.
No, it was immediately after I got my LLM at Berkeley. I wanted to big deal.
Wait, you went to Smith too, right?
No, Bryn Mawr.
Close.
The other all-women's college.
Is that one in California?
Philadelphia. There is a Bryn Mawr, California. That might be what you're thinking.
Oh, Bryn. Gotcha. The way you said it, I was thinking of something completely different.
There's a Scripps College in California.
Sometimes in podcasting, you just go somewhere else.
You looked at my LinkedIn.
Yeah, I did, but I forgot. There was someone else in our class that went to Smith.
Yes.
A couple people did, I think.
I know of just one person.
Just one person. Yeah. Okay.
Because Smith, Bryn Mawr, and a couple others are all part of a Seven Sisters network of colleges.
Yeah. It's a crazy name. Like I didn't even know about that until I came to Seattle.
Yeah.
But okay, so you went to Berkeley, got your LLM.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, you went to.
I went to San Francisco for 2 years,
Yeah.
And I wanted to try to stay in San Francisco, and that's why I wasn't ready yet to take the bar. I think I had to wait just 1 more year so I wouldn't have to take the whole thing all over again, and I could just take half of the California bar.
Okay.
And so the only way I could practice in California was if I worked in-house.
Gotcha.
And so I worked in-house for a hot minute, and then the pandemic hit, came home, and, they went through some financial overturn a little bit, and they didn't need an in-house attorney anymore.
Yeah.
And so got laid off. And immediately after that, I think within 3 weeks or something, got a job offer with King County Department of Public Defense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just similar work to what you were doing in Snohomish?
Yeah. They had me on their arrest calendar there too for a year in the height of the pandemic.
How was that?
So stressful, actually. I'm like, it was bizarre too, because what do they call unprecedented times?
Yeah, constantly.
Yeah, constantly hearing that. So it was a really strange time in the courts. For about 8-ish months, maybe a little less than that, most of the courts had shut down completely, with the exception of any of the jail calendars, because people need to get out of jail.
Yeah.
And so there were no jury trials happening, for example, for a good amount of time. And that also meant that a lot of people that had serious crimes pending were just sitting in jail waiting for their day in trial, or they'd plead. And so the jails were also booking up like crazy. And people don't stop committing crimes, so the calendar was just also really chaotic.
And there was a lot happening. You were in that system during everything that happened in Seattle with the riots and the...
Yeah.
So were you representing any of those people?
I represented a handful of them. There were a couple private attorneys that concentrate in civil rights practice and all that kind of stuff that were doing a lot of pro bono work. So it was really nice to actually have a handful of private attorneys handling a bulk of people that are in the jail and in the criminal justice system for the very first time in their life, and having them be able to do that hand-holding while I'm doing the rest of the cases.
What were most of the cases that you were doing?
A lot of domestic violence. A lot of these, I call them technical burglaries and technical robberies. They're a second-degree burglary is basically two misdemeanors combined with each other, a trespass and a, theft or something like that.
Amazon packages and...
No, Home Depot. A lot of Home Depot thefts.
At home, going in and stealing
Going in
stuff?
when they're not supposed to. They'd already been previously trespassed, and going and stealing one of those high-powered drills or something like that.
Really?
That's technically a burglary too.
Something just happened in the news at Home Depot. Like there was like 40 people that got busted in Bellevue, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, like I don't know I think they were like taking stuff and selling it.
Organized retail theft?
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw a lot of that too.
Yeah. What was the craziest thing you ever saw?
On the arrest calendar?
Yeah.
I saw a lot. The craziest one, I think actually in Everett would have been this woman that got arrested for, she was a sugar baby, self-proclaimed, who was arrested for the headline. The really, really crazy headline was she shot this guy in the head while he was going down on her because he wasn't doing it properly. That's the headline. Turns out it was a lot more tragic than that. She was a call girl, and he was a regular customer. And I think he'd gotten just a little too aggressive with her. And so she pulled out a gun and shot him in the head.
Wow.
He lived. He was alive for 3 days before anybody found him. But that was probably the craziest thing I've seen on the arrest calendar. Yeah. A lot of crazy things happen on the arrest calendar. I've had to actually, this was in Snohomish County too, I've actually literally stood in between my client and the corrections officers before. This one was a sad case. She was arrested for misdemeanor domestic violence assault against her father. She was suicidal, and he'd tried to prevent her from running off to go and kill herself. And in the process of that, she'd hit him or scratched him or something. Neighbors saw, called 911, and she gets arrested for domestic violence assault. She's, maybe 19 or 20, really young. Terrified out of her mind and still likely borderline suicidal. And apparently 8 or 10 hours later, she meets me for her day in court. And I must have been the first person to even show her just an ounce of compassion and kindness. And so while I'm telling her how I'm going to get her out of jail that morning, she just throws herself on me and gives me a huge hug, which is a big no-no, apparently. And so all of a sudden, we're sworn by 5 different COs who see this, and they're hands on their tasers and stuff like that. And I'm literally just no, it's fine. She's okay. And they keep screaming at both of us. It's not okay. She's not supposed to touch the attorney. And eventually everybody calmed down, and I was just okay, don't hug me again. I can only hold them off for so long. But yeah, so that probably is the craziest thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, just having to break that all up.
Yeah, having to stand in between tasers and my client.
How do you not bring home some of this stuff though?
Oh, I do.
What's the coping mechanism?
Cats and video games. My poor husband has heard me cry to him a million times over.
Yeah.
And he'll just throw a cat on my face, put a controller in my hand, give me a glass of wine, and we're good.
But he's a lawyer too.
He's a lawyer too.
Yeah, so that helps a little bit.
Yeah, not the same kind of lawyer, so that's also good.
Yeah. Do you when you guys argue though? Is it just brutal?
No, I win every time. I'm the trial attorney.
Yeah.
I'm trained in arguing.
I feel like that's the cliche joke though. About But are there ever times where it's you just trying to talk about something and it just turns into this complicated discussion?
Always, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's why you guys are together, right?
Yeah. It's for the intellectual stimulation.
For
definitely.
Sure. That's great. So let's talk about your judge candidacy.
Yeah.
Why did you want to do this?
I always wanted to be a judge at some point in my career. Mm-hmm. It's coming a little bit earlier than I had planned for. And part of the reason for that is the time I spent practicing in this particular court. There was just a new tragedy every day, and it wasn't because of the people that were being victimized by the crimes, and it wasn't because, I lost my trials or anything like that. It was a lot of how the judiciary works in that court. I found it really hard to just do my job. I found it really hard to get anything done in that court, whether the law was on my side or not. And I found even just the general management of the court pretty bad. It was inefficient. People were waiting around for hours all the time. And so after a couple different injustices that I did, like, you know, cry to my husband over, I said enough is enough. Somebody needs to make a difference here. Somebody needs to change the status quo. Like, it can't just be the way it is right now. It's not doing anything for the people that go in and out of that court, regardless of who they are. I'm talking even like victims of crimes or anything like that. It's not putting less people out on the streets. It's not doing anything for public safety. And it's certainly not doing anything to uphold constitutional rights of anybody who walks through that court. My last straw, I think, if I'm thinking about this in the right chronological order here, was on one of the misdemeanor arrest calendars again. This individual, he'd been picked up for a warrant on I believe it was a criminal trespass, so a non-violent crime. And because it was a non-violent crime and he didn't have an extensive violent history or anything like that, he'd been eligible for a diversion court called community court. Mm-hmm. Basically, you enroll in there, you enter into an agreement with the court, and you get connected with the resources they want you to connect with, and your case gets dismissed in like 2 weeks. So he'd been picked up on a $25 warrant, and it was the only thing that was keeping him in jail after he'd resolved all of his other matters. And so the prosecutor and I were in agreement that he should be released and enrolled in community court, which you have to be out of jail to participate in. And the judge decided that because he'd missed court so many times that he needed to have some skin in the game. And she kept the $25 bail while my client is crying and begging on his knees for her to let him out. And in the same breath as she said he needs to have skin in the game, she also said he needs to, you can talk to your attorney about getting bailed out by the defense fund or something like that, which isn't a thing. I'm sure she was talking about the Northwest Community Bail Fund. And he'd had some temporary housing, the kind of housing that you need to check in every 24 to 48 hours to keep. Otherwise, that bed goes to somebody else who needs it. And I'm pretty sure he lost that housing just after being in jail for about 24 hours. And so that was the last straw. Yeah. This is an individual who needs help as much as he can. And nobody is going to be motivated by $25 bail unless they have not a cent to their name, right? And so that was it. That was the day I came home to my husband and I was like, I gotta do something. I gotta run. And so that's why I want to make the system work the way it's supposed to. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what is the appeal of being a judge though? Like for it, just progression wise, you start here and are you looking to like kind of go up in the ranks or what's that process look like?
Eventually, that would be great. This is coming a lot earlier than I wanted it to. I had other career plans in mind. I really like being a trial attorney also. Mm-hmm. So I'm giving up a career that I love to do
money,
this.
Right? Like it's like, isn't it? I mean, are you still in the public sector?
No, I had to quit my job to do this.
Okay.
So I'm fun employed,
I guess. You were in the public sector before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But is trial work in the public sector compensation decent or is it compared to private? Yeah.
No, it's not. I didn't do it for the money.
So you're used to
it's really obvious I didn't do it for the money.
Yeah. I just am curious because that is most people on the defense side, they go that route and they make really good money doing it. Eventually
you have to have a lot of tenure at these public defender office, at the same public defender office too, to get the pay bump. So no, I'm not taking a pay cut I took a major pay cut by quitting to do this. But no, eventually I would like to, my career would be really great if it ended up at the Court of Appeals or something like that. The appeal there being I'd be there making law, which is really exciting. Like the kind of law that other lower courts have to follow. That would be amazing. And I mean, you've seen what's going on with the state of the judiciary in this country too, right? Like it's more important.
I don't have, like, I'm not, you said that. I was like, yeah, I have, you might have to explain some of that.
You know, the Supreme Court decision that came down with Dobbs. Gotcha. It's really important to have judges, even at the lower levels, that know the law really well, have integrity, are compassionate, have, you know, a sense that the law needs to be impartial, and they're gatekeepers, not politicians, not, they're not supposed to bring their personal opinions to bear in the courtroom. And so I would like to add my voice to that, and I would like to sort of raise the level of integrity in the judiciary a bit, especially.
I mean, it's wild though, like to have that much perspective on all this stuff. And like you are from the east side here, right? Yeah. Like you could have pursued just a pure path of like monetary reasons, and like, you know, just Bellevue is not known for its giving back type. I mean, that's always been my understanding of like you were from that side, but like you're on a completely different path than that. Like, where does that come from? Like, why is this call to you so much?
Yeah, I always wanted to do some kind of public service ever since I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah. I like working with people. I like helping people. I like being, you know, I like giving people hope, I guess. Sounds really like flowery and really cliche, but like it was so rewarding to restore people's faith in the system, or just restore people's faith in humanity. Like the number of people that I represented that had never had anybody stick up for them in any way was heartbreaking. And I wish more people did this kind of work. And like,
there's not very many people doing it.
No. And there should be more. And, you know, I wish more people would go into work like social work and all that kind of stuff, because you need compassionate people doing that work. Maybe society would be a little bit better if not, you know, people cared about the homeless person and put him in a house.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Certainly everybody would be a lot safer, I think.
I mean, I've done like 150 of these episodes, and almost everybody that's come on here is like talking about themselves and what they're trying to do and stuff. So it's very refreshing to have somebody
thank you.
That, you know, cares about other people. Yeah. So what is the process of running though?
Yeah. So it happened. It was like a whirlwind decision. I don't know. I made it one night and then talked to James, and we figured out, okay, here are the people we know that are plugged into the political realm. Let's talk to them and see if it's even possible to do it right now.
And when was this? Like, it's what, October 8th right now?
May, I think. I think it was in May. Yeah. I made that decision, and then literally 3 days later, I registered.
Damn.
We made the decision during registration week, which is just 5 days. And so like I found out that, hey, now is the time for a candidate like me. Now is the time to do it literally. Like I have 2 days to do it if I want to do it. And so I registered, paid the registration fee, and my name ended up on like the website for it. And then from there, we needed to find people to actually help us that knew what they were doing. Mm-hmm. Neither myself nor my husband have any knowledge on how to run a campaign. Well, now we do. But so we just hopped on the phone with as many people as we knew that know anybody who's run a campaign whatsoever.
And what does the work look like now? Like when is the actual voting? And
ballots should drop in mid-October, I believe. And then the election day is November 8th.
Okay. I think this should be out in time for then. I'm sorry if it's not. We record a little ahead of time, but so you're like, what does the actual day-to-day look like for you?
It's a lot of answering emails. Now it's just a lot of doing meetings like this right now, going out there and talking to people. A lot of door knocking. So I think at this point we may have, as an entire team, knocked maybe 2,000 doors at this point or something. But that's just maybe even more than that.
Are you tracking it too, like on your?
Yeah.
What?
We have an app for it.
Okay.
There's an app for it.
What's the response you get most of the time? Is it like go away or?
Usually only about 10 or 20% of the people that we door knock on actually answer the door. A handful of them will just take the literature that we hand out and just say, oh, okay, thanks, bye. And then some of them will actually sit and talk to us for like 5 minutes. Damn. Most of them will let me get my like 10-second pitch out at least.
Yeah. God damn. I didn't realize it was like that level of even why that rather than like social media or web presence.
People like to meet their candidates too, like in person. And I don't think my opponent is door knocking. At least I've not seen anything on the socials to tell me otherwise. And anybody we've door knocked on has not met him yet. So
how fun is it to have an opponent like just to like to be running against somebody?
Makes the stakes higher. So I'm running against the currently seated judge too.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he's the incumbent.
Have you tried cases in his court?
I have not had extensive experience in front of him. I practiced in front of other judges in this particular court, but there is a very specific reason we picked him. Actually, there's a couple. The main one being, though, is there's just been a general consensus amongst all of my now former colleagues, but all of my public defender colleagues, that he's particularly hostile and unpleasant to appear in front of for women defense attorneys. And that was why I picked him. Also, he according to a lot of my colleagues too, and generally all of the public defenders feel this way, he tends to act like a second prosecutor in the courtroom. So he's not doing his job being the gatekeeper and impartial.
Yeah.
And as our campaign has evolved, we've found that it's like we've just scraped the button, like scrape the surface, whatever that expression is. Like the issues are really deep seated there. It's not just female defense attorneys that he's showed a little bit of bias against. He is hostile to all women in the workplace for the most part. We've gotten all anonymous at this point because people are afraid of retaliation at this point. But he has been really hostile to women who work in the courtroom, people who he's technically a superior to. And it's hard it's really hard to hear all of those stories, like people who need that job, people who maybe aren't protected by any kind of union or something, that, he is determining their entire livelihood. And they have to put up with yelling and verbal abuse.
Yeah. I feel like he's going to come out after this podcast after this. He does not sound like a nice guy.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
And so the stakes got even higher for my candidacy. Like, I'd like to make that court a safe place for everybody.
Is it just head to head, or are there other candidates?
It's just head to head. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's me and him.
How is it progressing so far, or how is it looking so far? Do you have any early indicators?
Not really. It's a nonpartisan role or nonpartisan position. And so there was no primary. And so there's no real metrics other than funding to measure how we're doing. We've raised a lot more than he has, though. Yeah.
Are there going to be Elect Vaddadi commercials coming on?
Hey, we are going to film some. I don't know if they're going to come on the TV, but they'll definitely be
online.
Yeah, online.
Yeah. Because some of those, like...
They won't be cheesy, I promise.
I mean, some of the facts, though, like, I could see, that being used in a campaign. Like, I just have a comedian friend that has, like, he has a bit about just, like, bad political campaign ads, like suspicious behavior, and like it just keeps repeating it. So it made me think of that. But it seems like you're having a good time with running, and that's awesome.
It's exhausting.
I'm surprised you have so much like energy or charisma.
I have a lot of coffee in me right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you better keep it going because you're gonna be knocking on doors all.
Yeah, after this, we're gonna go knock doors, say hi to voters in Seattle.
So, if you do get elected, when do you start?
January.
Yeah. And are you what's that job? I don't really know anything about judges, like what they, besides listening to cases.
Yeah, so Seattle Municipal Court is a court of limited jurisdiction. They only deal with misdemeanors, and not just only misdemeanors, but misdemeanors where Seattle Police Department is the arresting agency.
Okay.
You'll have the judges only deal with the criminal caseload and the occasional wedding after court hours. And then traffic tickets will also filter through there, but they're usually presided over by one of the court magistrates, which is a different role.
So misdemeanors by Seattle PD?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And the public defenders or the King County Public Defender's Office, they have that contract. And the prosecutors are the city attorney in Seattle. And the judges, you're right, they preside over the criminal matters, all of the entirety of the case. So they'll do the arrest calendars, they'll do the arraignments, any pretrial hearings, actual trial. They'll do all the rulings and everything like that, and any post-trial adjudication. So, probation violations and stuff like that. And their role, and I think I've said this a couple times, is basically to be like a neutral gatekeeper. Make sure that everybody,
basically,
kind of, they need to make sure everybody's following the law. They themselves are not supposed to do anything outside of the law. They're not supposed to insert themselves in between an attorney and their client. They're not supposed to do other attorneys' jobs for them. And they need to know the law. I know that sounds really obvious, but part of the reason why I'm running too is I just noticed that there's a pretty low bar for general competence in that court too. I saw a lot of really problematic decisions, a lot of decisions that didn't really follow the law, but more or less how the judge felt about the situation. And so yeah, that's basically what they'll be doing.
Is it a little bit like professors where like if they get tenure, they don't have incentive to like keep working?
There's no tenure here at this court. It's an elected position, but it's every 4 years. And I mean, I don't know, how many times on a ballot have you ever seen a judge with an opponent? Right? It's almost always an unopposed thing. You just tick the one name that's in that position. And so I do think that a lot of judges, especially in these lower courts, get a little bit complicit. They're like, I have this gig. Nobody's ever going to run against me. Nobody cares. It's a good paying job. Like,
yeah, it's comfortable. And you just,
as long as you don't really
do anything. Yeah. You're a judge.
As long as, there's no Me Too type complaints or something like that, I think usually people don't pay attention. And I would like to also change the culture of that.
Do they have to wear robes too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you wear underneath it? Just like regular clothes or?
It's some, business, casual business, regular stuff.
Nobody's like naked under that, right?
No. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, there might be.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't ask.
I was just always curious about like if just somebody gets really sweaty. I know we've covered a bunch of random stuff. I asked you to bring on a story. Did we already cover that? Or
I think so.
Oh, did we? Because I have like a specific like segment for stories. You said you brought a couple. Did you have any others you want to tell?
I can tell a couple. Okay. Yeah. So I already told a few, but
let me cue up our music for it, okay?
It's story time. It's story time with Adam. Yeah, it's story time. It's story time with Adam and friends.
We take this very seriously here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell.
I'm learning a lot today. You're learning about story time on Fathom and Friends. All right.
High pressure intro.
You've already given so much good stuff. It's just like I didn't queue up the story time thing, so
that's okay. I'm glad I heard that song.
Yeah, me too.
So one of my very first trials in Seattle Municipal Court, it was a DUI that was actually 10 years old. My client had left the state, and so he didn't know about this particular case until he couldn't get his license back. I think they charged it by the time he left is the situation. But it was a situation where he'd gotten into an accident on, Aurora 99 in Seattle. Mm-hmm. And a police officer came out to investigate, was on scene for about 40 minutes, asking questions back and forth with everybody, trying to figure out who was at fault and who to give a ticket to, I presume. And it wasn't until like the 40-minute mark when he figured out there wasn't really anything wrong to figure out who was at fault for this accident. And then he suddenly was like, "Oh, I smell alcohol on your breath," to my client. For the first time ever, it suddenly became a DUI investigation after about 40 minutes. My client refused field sobriety tests, and he refused to take the breath test. And so there was also no blood alcohol whatsoever in this whole case. And I failed to mention, too, my client was a black man. This police officer was a white SPD officer in 2012. And so we go to trial. My client still lives out of state, so he flew in particular just for this case. And we go into first day of trial, and my client's like, "Hey, how long is this gonna take? My wife and we have our flight at 5 p.m. today." I was like, "Oh my God, trial's gonna take like 3 days." I don't know how this happened. I had also just taken over this caseload too, so I'd only met this client over the phone like a week and a half ago, prior to trial. So I don't know who communicated with him how long trial was going to take, but it was not me. And so we managed to actually get the judge to allow him to appear virtually for trial, which was great. The first, and I presume probably the last after this case, to ever do that. And it was great though. So my client, we do the first day of trial. My client flies home that night and appears on camera at 9 a.m. the next day. We go through the regular motions of trial. I give my opening statement. My theme was power versus powerlessness. It went over real well. And we finish up the end of the day we're halfway through cross-examination of the lead officer. And then we come back to the final day of trial. We have just the rest of my cross-examination and closing arguments. And so we go into the first day of trial. My client appears virtually again, and he is on camera wearing a Black Lives Matter hat. And I actually didn't notice he was even wearing a hat. It wasn't until one of my friends messaged me on our Teams chat saying, "Hey, I love your client's wearing a Black Lives Matter hat. He understood your theme," or whatever. And I was like, "Yeah, it's great. Cool."
This was in 2022.
This was,
okay.
2021. So this was fall of last year.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was like, if he had that hat in 2012,
that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, he was very foreshadowing.
Yeah. And so we had a motion to argue for about 40 minutes before the jury came out. And before the jury's about to come out, the prosecutor leans over to me and he's like, "Hey, your client's wearing a hat. Maybe you should tell him to take it off." And I was like, "I'll let the judge do it. Don't tell me how to do my job." And so he stands up and he's like, "Judge, Mr. Client's wearing a hat. I don't think you like that," or whatever. And so she's like, "Yeah, Mr. Client, this is a This is a courtroom. We don't wear hats here. Please remove your hat. And so my client takes his hat off and he puts it, he's sitting on a couch. He puts it still on display on the back.
Top of the couch.
The top of the couch. Thank you. So still completely in camera view. And I need to also kind of tell you the layout of this courtroom too. You have the judge sitting in the front, and then the jury is to the right of the bench. And my client's TV screen that he was displayed on was actually a little bit behind the jury. So the jury would have to actually crane their head over to look at him if they wanted to. I say that because I don't think the jury actually ever saw any of him during this entire proceeding. We let the jury in. I stand up to start my cross, and prosecutor stands up and is like, "Judge, can I get a sidebar?" And so we go into sidebar, and he's like, Mr. Client still has that hat in the background view. I think it's inappropriate. He's trying to influence the jury with a political statement of Black Lives Matter, like all this stuff. And I'd like you to ask him to remove it. I think it's prejudicial. And my supervisor was with me for this one too. And so both of us are there, and, we both are like, no, it's first off, leave aside the fact that Black Lives Matter is not a political statement, but just a fact. He's got a First Amendment right, also freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of speech. Like, you wouldn't ask him to remove his shirt if he was wearing a Black Lives t-shirt in trial. This is no different. Judge rules against us, and in front of the whole jury, she tells my client, you need to remove any writing from view of camera. And my client's really upset about this and says, I don't need to do anything. I'm in my own house. And long story short, they get into a bit of a screaming match with each other. Judge and client are both screaming at each other. Jury is sitting there like, what is happening? And so eventually she stands up and she's like, I need to excuse the jury. We'll address this outside the presence of the jury. Jury goes out. She's like, you need to talk to your client. And so we talk to our client. He's upset. Judge is upset. Everybody's upset. We go back in and ready to start cross-examination again, except the judge is like, I don't think the jury can be impartial anymore. I think that, his right to a trial is now in jeopardy, and I'm going to declare a mistrial. And, prosecutor stands up, says, I object. I think, the Seattle jury can parse out the issues of this case. I would like trial to continue. We also asked for trial to continue. It mistries anyway. And it mistries because, she decided to get into a screaming match with my client. That
must have been so weird too, yelling at somebody over Zoom in front of all these other people.
In front of all these people. Turns out she also has like a poster that says diversity in sign language in her courtroom. And one of the tattoos on one of the arms says Black Lives Matter on it too. And so, she has it displayed in her own courtroom, but my client should not
have it.
No. We found out just an hour or two later, my colleague ended up in the elevator with two of our jurors, and they were going to acquit. 5-6. They took a vote. 5 out of 6 were going to acquit, and I probably could have pushed that 6th juror to acquit too.
Damn.
And yeah, that sucked. The reason my client got very passionate about Black Lives Matter too, the cause is not only because he's a Black man, but the cause is really near and dear to his heart because just a few years later, maybe or earlier, 10 years or something like that, his son had been murdered by SPD. So it, natural for somebody to feel really emotional about being told they can't associate with that movement. And so that was my very first experience in this courthouse. Yeah. We managed to get that case dismissed later on.
That's good. I
appealed to the prosecutor. Yeah. Eventually the prosecutor also agreed that, we don't need to do this trial again.
Yeah, damn.
You were going to win it.
Well, shit.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, it's a good ending, but it's also, that's a heavy story.
Yeah. That is what it's like to practice in that court, though.
Oh, for sure.
You have these judges that don't have any compassion for what people in their courtroom may have gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to me that somebody in such a position of authority and, you know, a judge can't compose themselves. Like, can't be the bigger person in the room.
Well, what I'd be curious about is if you are elected, I want to have you come back like a year from now and be like, this is why they're like, you know what I mean? Like, I just, because it's such a, I don't have any basis of what that's like. And I'm sure people have judgments on, you know, what it's like to be a public defender or prosecutor or whatever. And like, you've been on that side of it. And it's just the lifestyle that you live and are getting into. It's wild.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so much work and like so intense, but like, it's pretty badass too.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you coming on. If people are listening or watching, where can they learn more about your stuff, your campaign? And I don't have the exact date of when this will release, but even if they want to learn more about you.
Yeah. They can go to electpooja.com. That's my website.
That's simple.
I'm on Twitter too, Vaddadi Pooja, at Vaddadi Pooja, Vaddadi Pooja. I think my Instagram is I think it's elect Pooja as well. And LinkedIn, I believe, is LinkedIn/Pooja Vaddadi. So easy to find me on all the socials except for TikTok, but I'm told that my team wants me to be on TikTok before the election is up.
Good luck with that. It is a weird place.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
This was fun. I learned a ton. It was like I'm like having flashbacks from law school a little bit, just in terms of the language and I think I made the right decision for me, but I'm really happy that you're doing what you're doing. And thank you. Like I've had the first episode we did with a lawyer, a sports lawyer, you know, Sarush.
Oh yeah.
And then I had a bunch of guys from Seattle U Law School come on, settle an argument. It was like we recreated a case over a fight over Settlers of Catan. Zach, Cole, and Randy. So
nice.
No, that was somebody else. But it's been fun to just have Seattle U people come on and throw that perspective. So thank you for doing it.
Thanks for having me. It was good to see you after 8 years.
It's been too long. I know you got to get going, start knocking on doors, and that game's going on. But if you did enjoy this episode, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and the notifications bell in the right-hand corner so you don't miss our content. And if you have any questions or comments, make sure to throw them into the comment section just so we can have those answered, and they help us. Was there anything else you wanted to plug too?
Vote for me.
That's a civil one. Please vote for Pooja. And if you just listened, make sure to rate and review us wherever you're listening. And as always, follow us on Instagram at FNF Pod. We're going to leave you with Jaga.
I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught